Okay, so now we are going to work on calculating the median. And the median actually means the middle of the numbers in our data set. And this too has a two-step process. The first step though is actually putting the numbers in our data set in order from lowest to highest. So let's work with our first one. And so we're going to go from lowest to highest. There's no adding in this one, just ordering. So what's our first number? 2. Our next number here would be 4. Then we've got 6, 8, 8, 9, and 12. So our first step is done. We've put them in order, okay? All right, so once we've done that, the next step is we gotta look at which one is the number in the middle. So when you look at that list, which number is right in the middle? Okay, so I'm gonna grab our little crayon here, and if we look at our data set, the number right in the middle is this one right here. And we know that because we've got the same amount of numbers to the right and the same amount of numbers to the left, which means that 8 is the median because it's right in the middle in our data set. Okay, so let's do the same thing for our next data set. And so step number 1 is we want to put them again in order. Always, never forget this. A lot of people tend to forget that step, and then they pick the number, and the number that they choose is wrong because it's not sorted. So that's not really the number in the middle when you take a look at all of your numbers in order from lowest to highest. So we're going to start with that right now. I'm going to put them in order. 6, then 8, then 9, and 12. So now we've placed them from lowest to highest in order. And now we're ready to pick the number in the middle. So which one is the number in the middle? In this case, once again, is 8. And that is because we have the same amount of numbers to the right and the same amount of numbers to the left when we put them in order, which means that 8 is our median. Okay, great. So now we've got another data set, and this one just happens to be in order already. So we don't need to do that list again. We need to resort it. It's already sorted from lowest to highest. So the next step is, what is the number in the middle? Okay, well, the number in the middle here is a 6, which means that the median for this data set is 6. Okay, now we got one last data set, and this one's a little bit tricky. So you'll notice that this has been fairly easy because all of our data sets had an odd amount of numbers. So we had a total of, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers here. So we know that there's only one middle, and you're always going to have an even amount of numbers on the right and an even amount on the left. We had 5 numbers here, so once again, it's easy to pick out the middle because you're going to end up with 2 numbers on the right, 2 numbers on the left. When you've got 3 numbers, it's easy to pick the middle because you know you're going to have 1 number to the right and 1 number to the left. But when we're dealing with an even amount of numbers, things get a little bit tricky. We see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, well, why don't we start by doing our first step, which is sorting them so that we have them from lowest to highest. So we're going to go with 2, and then we're going to do the 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so we did the first part, which is putting them in order. Okay, so our next step is actually picking out the middle, but we have a bit of a problem. If you notice, because we have an even amount of numbers, if we pick the 5 as the middle, well, we would end up with 2 on the left and 3 on the right. So we can't really pick that number. Okay, well, what about if we pick the 6? That looks like it's in the middle. Oh, but wait, we still have a problem. We've got only 2 numbers on the right now and 3 on the left. So we're never going to be able to fix this problem because we have an even amount of numbers. So we can't just pick one. So when this happens, and it may happen often, you actually have to pick the 2 numbers that are in the middle. So in this case, we would pick the 6 and the 5. And that means we have 2 numbers on the right and 2 numbers on the left. But does that mean then that there's 2 medians to this number, 5 and 6? No. So what it means is once we did that, okay, we need to get the mean of those 2 numbers. And so we said we get the mean of a number by first adding them together and then dividing that total by the total amount of numbers on that data set. Okay, in this case, we're not using the full data set. We're just looking at the 2 numbers in the middle. So we've got 2 numbers in the middle. We got to understand what is the middle of those 2. And so in order to do that, we're going to get the mean. And so step number 1, we're going to add them together. Only those 2. So 5 plus 6, which is 11. And then now we're going to divide that 11 by the total amount of numbers that we're using to calculate that mean. And in this case, it's just the 2, the 5 and the 6. And so that gives us a 5.5. So in this special scenario, the 5.5 is the median. So just a quick to remember, we're going to do a little bit of a recap. So when calculating the median, we got to do 2 things. Number 1, we have to get our numbers in the data set all in order from lowest to highest. Do not forget that step. It's very important. Once you've done that, then you got to pick the number right in the middle of all of them so that there's the same amount of numbers on the right and the same amount of numbers to the left. That will be the median. But when we have an even amount of numbers, we're never going to be able to pick one number. So we got to pick the 2 that are in the middle so that we have once again the same amount of numbers to the right, the same amount of numbers to the left. And once we do that, we then need to get the mean of those 2 numbers. So we add them together and we divide them by 2. It's never going to be a division of more than just 2 because you're always going to be trying to get the mean of those 2 numbers. So it's always going to be add them together, divide them by 2. We're going to talk about the mean. So how do we calculate the mean? So this is another way to calculate an average. It's probably the one that it's used the most to calculate an average, and it's the mean. And so how do we do that? So once again, we've got our 3 data sets here, and the way to calculate the mean is a 2-step process. We do not have to put anything into order. We don't have to rewrite our list. We need to start by adding our list. So we've got this number here, and so let me just enter it right here. Okay, and let's start by adding them all. So we want to add the 2 plus the 6 plus the 8 plus the 9 plus the 2 plus the 8 and plus the 2. Okay, so let's get our calculators out and let's figure out how much this is. So when I look at it, we are getting a 37. Okay, so is that what you got? Let me try one more time. 2 plus 6 plus 8 plus 9 plus 2 plus 8 plus 2. Yep, 37. But we're not done. That's only step 1. Next, we're going to grab that 37 and divide it by the amount of numbers that we have in our data set. So what is the amount of numbers that we have in our data set? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 numbers. That means we have to divide it by 7. Okay, and so what does that give us? It gives us a 5.2. So what does that mean? It means that the mean for this data set is 5.2. So again, what did we need to do? We had to add all of our numbers. After we add them, we have to divide them by the amount of numbers that we have in our data set, and then that is going to give us the mean. Okay, so let's get the mean for this one right here. So we have to add them. 2 plus 6 plus 3 plus 5. So what do we got there? We've got 2 plus 6 plus 3 plus 5. We have a total of 16. But are we done? No, we're not done. Now we have to divide that 16 by the amount of numbers that we have in our data set. What is the amount of numbers that we have in our data set? We've got 4 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got to divide that by 4, which gives us a 4. So what does that mean? What's our mean? Our mean is a 4. All right. Okay. Our last data set, we've got 2, 1, 4, 6, 3. Okay, so to begin, what are the steps that we're going to follow? First step is to add them all. 2 plus 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 3. And what does that give us? So let me get my calculator here. 2 plus 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 3. Again, we have 16. And so what is our mean? We got to grab our 16 and we got to divide it by the amount of numbers that we have in our data set. So in this case, we've got 5 numbers in our data set. So we'll see right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so what does that mean to us? What is our mean? Our mean then is 3.2. So our mean is 3.2 because when we added all of the numbers and we divided them by the amount of numbers in our data set, we ended up with a 3.2. So going back to when we learned about our mode, we'll remember that, our median. When we learned about our median, we remember that when we were calculating the median for this data set, we had 2 numbers and we added them together to get 11, but we weren't done. We then had to divide them by 2 because essentially what we were doing is we were calculating the mean of these 2 numbers. So now it all makes sense, right? We were adding them together and then dividing them by 2 because it was the amount of numbers that we were using to calculate that median. Okay, and we only do that when we don't have a one number that's exactly in the middle. So like in this case, so we added it together and we divided it by 2, and that's how we ended up getting our median. So the same thing is the same process for our mean. Okay, so we already talked about how to calculate our median. The next one that we're going to focus on is the mode. And so once again, this is also a way of calculating an average. This one is called the mode, and the mode is the number that appears the most times. Okay, so multiple times. So the one number that appears the most times in our data set. We do not have to put them into an order like we did when we were calculating the median. We just have to look at our data set and pick out what is the number that appears the most. So we'll look at the first one. And actually, you know what? Let me move these right here so that we can actually do this without any issues. Okay. All right. So we look at our first data set. And what is the number when we look at this that appears the most times? We see that we have an 8 here and we have another 8 here. But we also see that there's a 2, there's another 2, and there's another 2. So there's 3 2s in this data set. Okay. Is there any other number that appears more than the amount of 2s that we have here? No, the closest number would be the 8, but it only comes out twice. See, we've got this one, it's only coming out twice. So that means that 2 is the mode. All right, so 2 is the mode because 2 appears the most times. Now looking at this data set, what do we see? Okay, so we see that there's a 4. There's another 4 here. Do we have any more 4s? No. Oh, but wait a minute. I also see that there is an 8. And there's another 8. So we've got 2 4s and 2 8s. We only have a 6 and a 9 and a 1. Can we actually have multiple modes? Yes, we can have multiple modes. So since there isn't a number that appears more than the other, but yet we have 2 4s that appear multiple times, and we've got 2 8s also appear multiple times, and neither of them appear more than the other, that means we have 2 modes, 4 and 8. Okay, and our last data set is right here. And once again, we've got to look at what is the mode. Well, what is the number that appears the most? But when we look at our data set, we notice that there aren't any numbers that appear the most. There's no numbers that appear multiple times. So what does that mean? That means that there is no mode. No mode. Okay, so we can actually have a data set that doesn't have a mode. Okay. Oh, I can't write with this thing. All right, so no mode. Okay, perfect. What we're gonna be talking about is calculating the range. So we said that the range is looking at our data set and practically saying, okay, so what were the numbers that were used in our data set to be able to come up with our averages, okay, our median, our mode, and our mean. So that's what our range is. So we would be using the same data set that we would be using for calculating the mean or the mode or whatever would be nice to do. But then they're going to tell us, okay, and what is the range? All right, so we have this data set right here, and suppose we've already gotten the median and the mode and their mean for it. But now the question says, well, you need to now calculate the range. So how do you calculate the range? Well, step number 1 is, for this one, we actually do have to put them in order. So let's put them in order. We've got 2, we've got another 2, we've got another 2, then we've got our 6, 8, and another 8. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to pick what is the highest number in our data set. Okay, so the highest number is an 8. And what is the lowest number in our data set? Our lowest number in the data set is a 2. Okay, perfect. So what do we do next? Well, now we need to subtract the 2 from the 8. So we get our highest number, which is an 8, and we subtract our lowest number, which is a 2, and our range then is 6. And that's how we know what the range is when we're asked to calculate the range used when looking at our data set. Okay, so now we've got another one right here. And so we need to put it into order, like I said. We've got our 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 6. Okay, so that was step number 1. We then need to look at what is our highest number. Our highest number on that data set was a 6. Our lowest number in the data set was a 1. Okay, what do we do next? Well, now we need to do our subtracting. So we're going to grab our 6. Hold on, our 6. And we're going to subtract our lowest number, which is a 1. And that gives us a 5. So when calculating the range is 5. That is how you calculate a range. Okay. So we cannot end this lesson without practicing what we learned. And so we've got a question here, which is very similar to any question that you would get in one of your textbooks. And it says, find the mean, the median, the mode, and the range for the following data set. Okay. So we've got this data set, and we're starting with the mean. So how did we say we were going to calculate the mean? Okay, well, in order to calculate the mean, the first thing that we were going to do is add all of the numbers that we have. So we're going to add them: 4 plus 5 plus 4 plus 7 plus 8 plus 11. And what does that give us? 4 plus 5 plus 4 plus 7 plus 8 plus 11. So we've got 39. All right. But we're not done yet. So when we're calculating the mean, we said we first add all of the numbers, and then we're going to divide it by the amount of numbers that we have in our data set. So how many numbers do we have in our data set? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means we're going to divide our 39 by 6, which gives us 39 divided by 6 is 6.5. So the mean is 6.5. All right, let me grab our little crayon so that we know what was the mean, and the mean is 6.5. All right, now we're going to calculate the mode for the same data set. So what did we say the mode was? The mode is the number that appears the most times. So let's write our data set. You don't have to write it, but just so that we know what we're doing, let's write it here. We got 4, 5, 4, 7, 8, and 11. Okay, so we said, okay, so to calculate the mode, we need to see what is the number that appears the most times. Well, we've got a 4 right here and another 4 right here. Do we see any other numbers that come up more times than the 4? No, 4 is the one, which means that the mode is a 4. Okay, now we're going to calculate our median. So for our median, we do need to put the numbers in order, if you remember. And so let's start by putting our numbers in order, and I'm going to put them right here so that our little tool doesn't get in the way. So let's start by putting them in order. So we've got a 4 and another 4 and a 5, a 7, an 8, and an 11. And so what did we say we need to do when calculating the median? Well, the median is a number that is right in the middle. Okay, so do we have an even data set or an odd data set? Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. That's an even data set. So that means we're not going to find a number in the middle, because if we look at the middle, we've got a 5, but that means that we would have 2 numbers on the left and 3 numbers on the right. And we've got a 7. If we use the 7 and not the 5, we would have ended up with 3 numbers on the left and 2 numbers on the right. So that means we got to use them both, the 5 and the 7. And what did we say we do? Well, we calculate the mean of those 2 numbers to get the median. And we do that by doing 5 plus 7, okay, which is 12, and we divide that by 2. Why do we divide it by 2? Because there's 2 numbers, which is 6. So the median for this data set is 6. Okay, and the last thing that we needed to calculate is the range. So we said we calculate the range by grabbing the highest number and subtracting the lowest number in our data set. Well, we already put them in order before, so why don't we just grab this and borrow it here. Let me see here. Oh, can I not move it? Well, let's leave this the way it is. Let's just rewrite it. So we've got 4, and for the range we said that we want to put them in order. 4, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11. So when you're calculating the median and when you're calculating the range, you first need to put your numbers into order. Okay, so to calculate the range, we need to grab our highest number, which is a number 11. We need to calculate, or grab our lowest number, which is a 4, and we want to subtract them from each other. So let's grab them here. Let's make this bigger. Can you see what I'm doing? Okay, we've got 11 minus 4. Let's make this And what is that? That's a 7. Okay. So let's get our answer now ready to go. So the question said, find the mean, the median, the mode, and the range for the following data set. And we came up with the mean was 6.5. The mode was 4. The median was 6. And the range was 7. And that is how we calculate mean, median, mode, and range in our data sets.